Welcome to the Habitat Center. We're in Namibia, in Africa, just in case you wondered. I'm Maritz. I'm the architect who designed it. This isn't an original idea. It's something that's used quite often in the informal settlements in Namibia, which we picked up. And what is interesting is how the rust has changed the appearance, because originally it was really, really bright, like a patchwork quilt. These gabions are filled with demolition rubble from the foundations of a multi-story building. The gabion bags are also made on site. We used standard galvanized diamond mesh wire, and it was quite straightforward. This wall is actually quite high, about 5 meters, and it retains a meter and a half of soil on the other side. The bags in this case are quite big. We made them 800 millimeters wide. Here on the ground we've got mica residue, which was from an excavation nearby for a filling station, and what we did is we packed it in a kind of clay basis, which I think has worn quite well if you consider that it's about 17 years, 18 years later. This is hydroform. It's a compressed earth stabilized brick. The system was developed by a Namibian and patented in South Africa. It's used quite extensively in Africa. It's a hydraulic pressurizing machine. You all probably know the Earthship system, which is where we got the inspiration from. What Earthship does is they plaster the tires, and they fill these gaps between the overlaps with waste like cool drink tins, soda tins and so on. However, we cut tires into segments, and then we tied it with wire across, and we filled them with earth as well, just to create a smoother finish. We left this unplastered for demonstration purposes. This whole range of walls were sample walls that we built in phase 1. We weren't too confident about how we were going to build with them, so we thought we'd test it out. This one is where we took the building rubble from the gabions that I showed, and we just used it as a kind of an ordinary building block. It gives quite a nice texture because the aggregate within the building rubble, the concrete foundations, makes a nice texture. This wall is interesting. It hasn't been maintained at all since construction. The adobe bricks were made from nearby clay deposits, and we used rectangular ice cream boxes to make the bricks with, and then it was mortared with the same material. It's unplastered. Normally when you do an adobe wall, you would plaster it with the same kind of mix, maybe with some lime mixed in, and of course you would maintain it so that you wouldn't get these insect holes nesting in it. This is an earth bag wall. You can see from the truth window the bags inside. We just use leftover bags from feed, cattle feed and so on, and then you put wire mesh on it and you plaster it on top. While we were doing this project, there were quite a few floods, and a lot of river stone was deposited in certain places in the city. So we managed to salvage that and build a sample wall from that. This is straw bale, which we don't generally use in Namibia because we don't really have straw. Straw is most often used for feed. You can see the clay with which we punctured it in order to plaster. Styrofoam block system. It's made in a town nearby. You put it up like normal bricks. You put reinforcing through the cavities from the foundations up, and then you plaster it. One of the things that bothers Namibians is if you do this, it sounds hollow, and we're not used to lightweight construction. What I found interesting in this experiment was just how much mortar it actually needs to stick the bottles together, because the bottles themselves are smooth, they don't have any key. And if it's done with earth type mortars, I think it's acceptable. If it's done with a cement-based mortar, it's not acceptable. Here we used excavation rubble in a kind of Roman drywall technique. Outside skins are drywall, and then the inside is filled with rubber and mortar, and we put a mortared capping on top to keep it in place. These balustrades were made using a mining rope that was salvaged from an old mine. We had a lot of fun going to the scrapyards outside town, where all sorts of things were collected and put together from various sources, old mines, factories, hospitals. These clay brick walls in the breezewall format create an old-fashioned farm cooler. Inside the cavity we have mesh with charcoal. It's filled with charcoal. At the top of the cavity we have a small dripper pipe, and as the water drips through the charcoal, it evaporates and it cools the space inside. We tried to keep a lot of the paving permeable, so we used crusher gravel between these steps in the amphitheatre. These are mesquite poles. Mesquite is an invasive alien in Namibia. It really is a problem plant, and unfortunately it doesn't grow thick enough to be harvested for wood that easily. So we use the branches in order to make these thin poles, and then wove them in various ways to make shade screens. This is the west side of the building. So these pivoting screens are used when they have big meetings. They can open them up for masses of people to move back and forth. And when the sun is in the afternoon is very low, they can close them. This is a homemade pivot system. We welded a flat metal ring onto the pole, put ball bearings inside, and then put this element on top. We wanted to show people that you don't need thick sections of formal wood that you buy in a store in order to make a roof construction. We also decided to use 50-gallon drums that we cut in sections to create a kind of a Roman tile roof. And then we ended up inverting the dome because it was easier to roof it like that. We call it concrete. You can cut it out with a machete. It's still very soft at that point, and then you put it in the sun to harden, and you can make lovely building blocks with it. What's really interesting about it is that it's very, very light. It contains an incredible amount of air. It's almost the same weight as styrofoam. You must keep water off the walls. We got for free from the test labs. Make very neat gabions because they're so nice and square. And we fill the center with the excavation rubble that we found nearby. It's a small machine. It's like a vibrating table with forms, and the family can get the machine and make the roof tiles as a living. We wanted to make a low-tech kind of green roof, so we used eucalyptus poles, very close spacings. On top of them put shutterboard, which we then waterproofed. We made a kind of a pool out of the shutterboard, which we waterproofed, filled with sand, and then planted with dry succulents. I really like the Namibian plants for green roofs. And it's spring now here, so everything is in flower. The welder actually went to town on the second phase. I think he really had fun. And we originally had planned to paint all this metal, but he insisted that we don't paint the parts so that people can see what they are. just like it. I like the inventiveness that went into the idea of, from the artist, into the idea of using themed scrap metal.